right, let's get this thing started. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Frostside Chat, our live streamed weekly. Oh man, start this again. Our weekly live stream post session discussion. Where we talk about what just happened during D&D. This is the chat for session 54. So if you've not watched that session yet, please go do that because there will be spoilers. I'm your DM Eric, and joining me we have Robin's player Chris.
Hello.
And Edmund's player Raymond is around somewhere. So this was part 2 of meeting the Goliaths.
Mm-hmm.
And Sky Tower Shelter is, if you couldn't tell by the map, it was baked into the game. It was there were, and this whole scenario is kind of part of the story that's already in the book, not the main story, but its own little story about these two Goliath clans feuding, and the part of the story about the Griffin and the kid. All that is from the book. But this was a situation where I had no idea how you guys would respond, what kind of plans you had. This could have gone anywhere from what it did to a bloodbath. And I was fully prepared to let it go either way, although obviously I was wanting you to go on this monster hunting mission, which is not from the book. Instead, it is from a DM's Guild mission called Wormdoom Hunt, which I've been linking to endlessly for the Crafting Icewind Dale. And I think starting next week, I'll make sure to link to it. In fact, we can do a giveaway for it. The designer I've worked with before was very ecstatic about me running.
Is it one of those linked
yes.
things where it's linked to the campaign?
Exactly, and he's done a couple of those, and I haven't been able to use too many of them yet. What's funny is I had to completely change this one because his version involved well, I didn't completely change it. I do have the dragon, but his version involved a frost giant. And I was like, we just had our big like frost giant thing, so it felt like a little bit of a rehash. So
yeah,
I'm changing things around. And also his because the book, again, I mentioned this, all these chapter 2 ones are designed for about level 5 and 6. Obviously you guys are much higher level, so I'm having to scale the threats, the environmental hazards, the monsters, everything up to try and match that level.
Yeah.
So I thought the diplomacy was fun. I like that Frey kind of took charge. And the fun thing is, it was a good excuse for Frey to take charge. And I like the fact that she even said, like, oh, those other Goliaths suck. And then we got to these Goliaths, like, yeah, these ones are much better. And that worked in her favor because she's like, I'm also tough and no nonsense. And, these are my people kind of a move.
Yeah.
And this guy is supposed to be very, like, antagonistic and abrasive and everything like that. But I thought that, in a weird way, that was kind of endearing to him that she was kind of the same way, and they could kind of bond over like their mutual, like, yeah, those guys are weak over there. So that was a fun bit of back and forth.
Yeah, it ended up working out really well. I will admit a little bit of frustration, and you could correct me if I'm wrong here, but it felt like after we had spent, I don't know how long we spent, 7-8 minutes talking about plans for what we were going to do when we get there.
Yeah.
It felt like you didn't want us to do that, so you just kind of shut it down. Like you wanted to just be a straight ahead, talk to them social encounter. Because the whole like impersonating of the chieftain just sort of very quickly just sort of fizzled as like he's not going to let us do that. All right, moving on.
Well, he got a deception check, and that was a pretty big deal. He had to make a deception.
I got a 3.
Yeah, he rolled a 3.
I got a 3.
Yeah. This was a case where you weren't necessarily just going to be able to roleplay your way out of it in some situations. And I will say that, it's not just combat that escalates as you guys raise level. The social situations can escalate as well. So it might take more. And I think...
the same tricks?
Well, I think it requires you to be a little more clever about it because... And Raymond actually pointed it out. He even said, like, oh, the Chief Ogilvy, based on what I talked to her about, would not be this way. She wouldn't be coming up here to capitulate and all of that. And he was exactly right. Now, you still tried it, which was fine, and maybe with a very good, but I was going to make you roll a deception check on top of that.
How would you have rolled had we made a good deception? I just got the feeling, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I got the feeling you just didn't want this to go that way.
I mean, it probably would have devolved at some point, but here's the thing. My main goal was to give you the mission.
Yeah.
The way you get there could have happened in a million different ways, so... The only way it would have really sucked for me is if it does turn into a literal bloodbath and they have no respect for you whatsoever.
Hostilities.
Yeah, and then we can't actually do that mission. Instead, this becomes the mission, which is just to fight a bazillion Goliaths. I assumed that you would try to avoid that as I would try to avoid that, so we try and go around that. But
I think I was imagining more of a situation like the Goblin Camp, where like we kind of had like it was like a long con sort of
Sure.
situation.
Yeah, and Sunblight too.
Yeah, it was the same thing, wasn't it?
I mean, it is on the table, but again, I think these situations escalate, and not every people and chief and everything is going to be as stupid or easily duped as a lot of the people that you have come across.
Yeah.
I think you've been able to deal with a lot of stupider creatures or people that
Yeah.
are more easily manipulatable, and in Sunblight especially, you were able to actually take the form of somebody they respected and was part of them. And generally acted that way, whereas here this was just not the case at all. It didn't feel like the heart was in it, and then I made you do the role wasn't there, so it kind of fell apart. I don't necessarily think it was a horrible plan, but it was going to be a much more challenging plan compared to those other situations. So I don't want you to stop doing that or give up on that necessarily, but you just need to kind of realize the audience that you've got, and
which is where Frey stepped in here.
Right.
We're like, all right, this is not the audience of deception, I suppose.
I'm not even sure that they speak giant, but she fucking said that, and I'm like, that's a cool idea. Let's do that. So I just kind of rolled with it as a way of further having this ties to.
It's funny that usually it feels like it's a bad idea to let Frey be the face, even though she tries a lot.
Yeah.
She ends up insulting people quite often.
Yeah.
But in this particular case, that worked. That was exactly what we needed.
And I thought that was a fun time to get her a chance to shine, which I guess, and honestly, this whole Goliath thing is supposed to kind of be for her thing. Kind of like other players have been able to shine, like
upgrade thing.
Yeah, and it's kind of her whole thing has been like the Goliath and her respect for, and gaining the respect and having the axe and everything. So
yeah,
I was definitely willing to roll with that a little more eagerly.
Yeah.
But I loved the discussion you guys had on the way there. Honestly, I hardly said a word when you guys were flying over there, and I let you guys just have this discussion. I loved hearing about all the plans and the different deliberations you guys had, because at the end of the last session we had that big talk. It didn't seem like you guys were interested in this quest or everything that was going on, and then all of a sudden,
I thought about our conversation from last week, Eric, a little bit.
Yeah,
and I think a lot of it comes down to what you said at the end, or in some point, where energy levels are at certain times. I really think that beginning of the evening is when we should be planning things, not the end of the evening when we're just sort of what's happening? Okay, let's roll with it.
Well, you talk about a producer role. I really do feel like that is one of the things I do try and pay attention to as a DM is the pacing, and try to get a feel for where everybody's at with the pacing and what I can do and what I should stop with and everything. And obviously a big part of our group specifically, which is far different than the Patreon D&D game I'm rolling, where we went hours and hours and hours, everybody was still up here. We end up going down pretty regularly at a pretty normal rate, so I can pretty much tell. And sure enough, at the end when I'm slicing you guys up with these creatures, everybody's like, fuck you, DM, and I was like, all right, we're getting to these grumpy levels, I need to be shutting this shit down. Versus the energy level would be more like, oh, I'm gonna fucking get you for that.
Exactly.
And I think but that does make sense. So this time the social scene was at the beginning, so you guys were all high energy, having these big discussions, which was a lot of fun. And I've mentioned before, as a DM, one of my favorite things to do is when I'm not talking, I just sit back and listen to y'all make your plans and deliberations. And I love that you all were going back and forth about, okay, how do we do this plan? Who do we side with? Who was telling the right story? Which was cool, because I'm glad that kind of stirred that kind of conversation. And I thought that led to some pretty cool questions that I wasn't necessarily expecting. I didn't honestly expect you guys to dive into the story part of it, where you guys were asking questions about who was really responsible for this, and how do you know it was them that did that? And I was expecting you guys to kind of treat it very flippantly and be like, look, just give us the quest and let's get out of here. But instead, I was like, all right, let's invite you guys in. Let's have a little social scene here.
We kind of laid heavily into the okay, this doesn't actually involve either one of you guys. Maybe your parents did all this shit.
Yeah.
End of it when we finally did understood the situation.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, we don't necessarily know if the other chieftain is lying, or if maybe that's just what her parents told her.
Yeah.
I mean, she could just not know that her parents killed a griffin back in the day. That's entirely possible.
Yeah, I don't know how much I want to say, but I mean, you guys are kind of figuring it out. But it's almost irrelevant to the actual. The truth is almost irrelevant because it's so far in the past.
Right.
That the fact of the matter is, both sides just need to be able to come together and essentially get over it.
Yep.
which I think you guys are basically figuring out.
Look how much we've matured.
Yeah.
Old us would have been kill, kill, kill.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
That's our listen to both sides of the story.
It's
We
tricky.
understand it.
It's also tricky when you meet the players with that kind of force of somebody who's like, back the fuck off and don't come near, because
Yeah.
the players, and I've talked about this before, they have an innate swagger. Even if you're playing a general good person, you'd have to be a very specifically kind individual to just not have a little bit of swagger, because you are kind of a superhero. I use the term hero very usefully in this universe.
Yeah.
Innately you are far stronger than the average person, so you can back up your shit, so you can kind of throw that around. So you really don't have to be kind to anybody. So if you're met with somebody who's kind of an asshole, then as the DM, you're always like, okay, how is this going to go down? Are they actually going to try to de-escalate?
Well, it's weird though, because in this case, you're exactly right, and we didn't deviate from it. Frey walked up with all the swagger.
Yeah.
She walked up with just complete assholery, and it just happened to work in this particular instance.
Yeah, it happened to work because very specific. She wasn't challenging them specifically. She was like finding the common ground, which was how weak the other tribe was, and all of that worked really well, and we worked on that. Instead, if she had come in and been and been antagonist to them, that would have probably been a lot more problematic. Yeah.
Yeah,
they were surprisingly effective. So yeah, that was the whole social scene, which I honestly I loved. I thought it went really well, a lot better than the Worm Doom one at the end of the last session. This one made me really happy about how this went. And it's weird to have these really gorgeous, nice cave like maps, and then there's no. They literally have like a room to room thing. But there's no dungeon crawl here. It's just a bunch of people hanging out, and they're like, oh yeah, they're having caves and stuff, and there's a shrine here, and there's a griffin nest here. I guess I shouldn't complain about having that content, but it's weird that they spent so much time expanding these two Goliath homes. And neither of them are actually dungeon crawls.
Yes. There was something I was reading on Reddit the other day that I completely agree with, a critique of how 5e writes campaigns. And like 5e needs to give some kind of, and I know why they wouldn't want to do that, because they want to keep the open world sandbox part of it, but they need to give some sort of optimal, like, here's the optimal path. Here's the path that we foresee. Maybe you guys won't do this, but here's how we foresee this going down. Because they keep giving these, like you said here, like they give this huge map with all these rooms, but no indication of how they're to be used.
Yeah.
Like, what's the function of these?
Yeah.
What in your mind? What would happen that would necessitate us going into
just describe this place in a couple of paragraphs about like, it's a cave, it's full of it's a home, there's cookery areas and beds, and there's here's where they're keeping their stuff, and instead it's like a room to room thing. It just felt very weird.
Right.
Obviously that's how you do a dungeon, but these are not meant to be dungeons. So although I guess technically they do mention the fact that, hey, if the players start a fight here, then 9 more Goliaths come from this room and all this happens. Like, all right.
They kind of prepared for that.
Yeah, so they technically prepare for that, but that would obviously not be in the, God, what a slog that would have been. So thankfully it didn't come down to that.
I feel like that's probably what we're afraid of more than we are like getting killed. It's just like, oh god, we have to fight a dozen fucking Goliaths.
Right.
This is gonna be 3 sessions worth of just fighting Goliaths.
I know. That brings me back to the Tomb of Annihilation when we fought all those fire newts, which was a cool map and an interesting situation, but there were so many fire newts.
It was just murdering fire newts.
It literally lasted like 3 sessions to where I think we surrendered. They surrendered at one point because they were just like, we're done.
Yep.
That would have been about halfway through Tomb of Annihilation, I think.
Yeah.
So my plan was to incorporate this this extra, which is a very classic monster hunting quest, which I think is fun. But the changes I had to make were I had to change the monsters involved, the threats involved, because you guys are way higher level. Well, I guess that's syncs with the second thing, is that I had to I had to upgrade it. So I changed the monsters because we just fought a frost giant. So I had to replace the main one of the main monster threats. And then I had to upgrade, like the original one is like the dragon's got kobolds, for example, and like I'm not gonna fucking throw kobolds at you guys. It's not gonna happen.
Yeah.
So instead, you guys had to go through a little bit of a gauntlet of environmental hazards, which I know to use very sparingly. And I know you guys have a spaceship, but I was like, you know what? This is mountain. There's still a good and you can't.
I did want to ask you about that because I did like we all got very excited about the idea of fighting a dragon in a spaceship. And then I felt you saw that coming, right? And that's where the snow stuff came from. Because
I will say two things. One, I promise, you will get a chance to do cool things with the ship at some point.
Yeah,
I don't want to necessarily. But my other thing is, the main purpose of the ship is to travel from location to location and not to do these little bunny hop maneuvers. Now, I will say that this is a special location, a special area where it does involve little bunny hop maneuvers. But I did have a contingency where it's like, all right, I don't want them to literally just... And the other thing is, unlike the other two sites where you knew where you were going, this time you don't know where you were going. So it was a question of like, well, it just seems boring if they're literally like flying right above the thing, trying to look down and seeing. Like, there's just nothing... Just no compelling adventure there. So for me, I was like, all right, we're going to make... And I wanted to make it more strenuous and challenging for you guys to try and scale up to your level. So yeah, you guys had to deal with the whole storm. And it almost, we haven't had to deal with the elements very much in a while. And Mountaintop, kind of brings back the mountain climb quest you guys had to do.
That's right, yeah.
So yeah, I threw some stuff at you. At Thimbleweed, not done very well in those survival checks. Those would have been more con saves for exhaustion.
They were already pretty painful. Yeah. Like that was, yeah.
And then the Howling Winds. The Howling Wind thing, I borrowed from another creature effect, which I'm probably not going to actually use, but maybe. That kind of produces that kind of a supernatural storm thing with the Howling Wind. And I thought, all right, I'm just going to use this as an environmental hazard, basically. So the winds are so bad, they just kind of fuck up your mind a little bit. And then I like the idea of literally having to... it kind of does the confusion spell, but it automatically makes you get like the worst result, which is to attack somebody.
Yeah.
And the tricky thing is, I went back and forth on whether or not to even give you guys like a map for it and roll initiative and have to go round to round. But I was thinking, man, I think it would honestly just kind of slow us down to use that. I mean, I kind of wanted to give you guys a chance to be like, hey, if somebody wanted to cast a spell or, well, I don't know what else you would do with it besides a spell, but something that could help you in the situation or help you move faster. Or something, then I would allow that. But I think putting you guys into initiative order and having a map and everything would have ultimately slowed everything down.
I mean, yeah, environment
versus just
I don't think it's worthy of initiative order.
So instead, I just said, you know what? And there, there's you're just gonna have to go through a gauntlet of just making these things and go through it. So hopefully it wasn't too painful. And I was really going back and forth on like how many do I do and how many can I get away with, but. My point was definitely to just start draining those resources and make it a tough thing. Like this should be a tough like ascension to a very inhospitable, dangerous area.
Yeah, certainly felt that way.
Yeah. And then I got to use pretty much the last creature that is part of Icewind Dale that we haven't used yet, which is the Peritons.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow. Specific to this campaign book?
Yes. So one thing I wanted to do with Tomb of Annihilation was with the random encounters was to try to check off all the cool monsters that can be found there. It's like the dinosaurs and like the plant zombie creatures and just anything that was cool that you wouldn't normally get anywhere else. And then Icewind Dale kind of the same way, like Yetis, crag cats, frost giant, all those kind of creatures and things. And then the one that I never got a chance to use yet, and it was specifically kind of a mountainy creature, was these Peritons. I was like, all right, we're going to use some of those.
Nice. Can I offer one critique?
Yes. You've never resisted at offering critiques before, so don't stop now. I will buff my skin.
And it may have been just thicker. How it was, like you said, like depending. The reaction is different depending on if it happens at the beginning and the end. You may want to watch how often you're using surprise rounds to increase the difficulty, because I think if my memory doesn't fail me. It's like more than half of our fights involve creatures surprising us.
Yeah.
I don't know where that should sit, but I think it should. I don't know. Personally, I think it should be like on the rare side of things, is for the players to get surprised by enemies. And I think we're more than half right now.
That would be interesting. I don't keep track of that stat, but that would be very interesting because it didn't feel like that to me. But you might be.
The last one we did. The last fight we got surprised. The bullays jumped out at us.
Yeah.
And And I know that it's an easy way to like increase difficulty.
Yeah.
But it's also like, I don't know, it's one of those like you use sparingly. And we even joked in this session about like, oh, Eric's actually going to let us sneak up on the creatures this time?
Yeah.
No, you're not. You're actually going to surprise us.
This was an interesting case where the creatures, I always had 6 of them, 3 up flying in the air and 3 on the ground.
Yeah.
And I was going to let you guys surprise on those. And then these creatures, they're very perceptive. They've got, the advantage on sight and everything. And so they were out hunting.
Question too is that, I'll let you finish actually, but yeah.
Well, I talked about this in crafting, and this is a hard thing to do. Whereas I feel like if we were playing on a tabletop, and I explained this scene to you, then somebody might have said, I'm gonna look around and see if there's other creatures, or can I roll a perception check to see if anybody else is around? In which case you would have probably been able to find them with a good enough perception check. I suspect because we're on roll 20 and I show you the map and I show you the creatures, everybody's like, all right, this is what we're dealing with. Let's go.
We assume everything that we see is what we see.
Right.
Yes, I think you're right. Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's an interesting side effect of the problem is if I'm too forthcoming, then that I tip my hand.
Well, I don't feel like what I feel like you might have helped this time is to ask for perception checks right before you did your thing. And let some of us not be surprised.
Well, that's what passive perception's for.
Oh, were you using that in this scenario? Oh, so they were stealthing?
Well, yeah.
Because passive perception is for them to... yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I assume that's what passive perception is for, is if you guys don't know, so you don't have to actively do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I suppose that's true. But I thought that was more like if someone's trying to stealth up on us, like they roll, and if they beat our passive perception, then we don't notice them.
Right. Yeah, I think that's the idea. And I think that's a tricky thing. Is I think if we were playing without the visual aid, I think people would be more forthcoming about asking those questions versus playing on roll 20. And I feel like you guys are very rarely looking around. And I like the fact that even the opposite of that, like Frey's even trying to like bumble into things. Like, hold on, let me steal there.
That's very true.
Yeah,
yes,
and absolutely. I tried to give you guys enough time, like Thimbleweed stealthing up there, and Edmund's doing a thing. And I'm like, if you guys want to formulate a plan, you can formulate a plan and get things off.
That was actually my other question: that Thimbleweed was actively stealthing, and you still did it to him.
So he specifically went over in stealth, and then came back to the group, and then just started talking to the group, and just it seemed like he was just part of the team again. So I'm like, all right, they're just coming at you guys now.
I guess maybe it's a bad assumption. It probably is a bad assumption.
Yeah,
is that like if you describe that we see something in the distance, that we are in a safe spot. That like when
that's what the clever
when you say stop, I have to describe a thing to you.
Yeah.
Then that is a spot where we're able to take action from there versus, no, you've stopped too late. Like, we could have stopped earlier where there weren't peritons in the sky.
Yeah. That's part of the tricky situation here is that my idea was you guys would be able to sneak up on some peritons, but at the same time you're being hunted by other peritons. Do you guys have the foresight or even the inclination to search around and see any other threats around while you're doing this, or is everybody stealthing, together and doing their thing?
Yeah. Now that we're talking about it, I think my complaint is more about 5e system in general, because what that calls for, and I don't like doing it, is just people to constantly be saying, I do a perception check, I do a perception check, I do a perception check, at every single description you give. I don't want to do that, but these situations kind of like...
I think if there's a dangerous... I think especially if there's a dangerous situation that you can see, or at least something you're uneasy about, I think you could definitely call for that.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. Yeah. I guess the other thing, my other complaint, not about the way you ran this at all, but more about the 5e system, is that we should have... I guess we should play, like, min-max it a bit better in terms of, like, if we're going to take a surprise round, we should all do something every time instead of just having one person do a thing as an opening volley, because... we could have all had an action this turn.
Yes.
And we just chose not to.
Yes.
Stupidly, because I don't know why.
It happens frequently with this group, I notice, is that somebody has a plan to do something, everybody else kind of sits there and waits for that plan to happen. But 5e allows everybody to do a thing.
Yeah, but the thing is, what it actually calls for, and the 5e, the way the system works, is for all of us just to say we're going to make a surprise round on the enemy. Because the way it works is you go into initiative, and then you all get to choose what you do. It's not like everybody has to say what they're going to do before the initiative is rolled.
Yeah.
Everyone gets to choose in initiative order. So it's more like we should just every time we should just say we're going to do it. We're going to do a surprise round on these guys.
Yeah. So
I don't like that, but it's just the way 5e works.
Yeah. Yeah, you can call out like something, or even say like, okay, let's just have.
I guess what we should have said in this instance is, well, I was going to say what we should have said is that as soon as Edmund does his gust of wind, we're all going to do a thing. We're all going to attack.
Yeah.
But in this particular case, we were not going to do that because we were hoping that the gust of wind would make the birds just fly away.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we just kind of shot ourselves in the foot there.
Which it might have, had there not been other birds hunting you.
Yeah.
Which that is an ongoing effect. That's still like this magical like tunnel storm just shooting forward, as far as I'm aware. So
I think so. Although we just got really hurt, so I don't know if it's still up.
That's true. Did I actually attack Edmund? I don't remember.
No. You did attack me.
These are not very. I will admit these are not very strong creatures, but they did a shit ton of damage right then. I did not expect that.
Like we talked about this before about I don't know what these creatures are, but we talked about like the best creatures being the sort of glass cannon creatures.
That's true.
The ones who get in and do their damage and then die.
And honestly, it's funny you say about the surprise round thing, and I need to pay more attention to that. But honestly, that is a huge tool for the DM because once the action starts happening, players start kicking ass so fast, and you start racking it up.
Yeah.
You do need to be sparingly about it, I will admit, but it's a good way to immediately ratchet up the tension level, and then things immediately, combat 9 times out of 10 starts skewing in the player's favor pretty quickly once they start getting those action economies.
I'm also saying this from the POV of one of the squishy players. Like the surprise round doesn't affect Frey or Thimbleweed much, but one surprise hit on myself or Edmund could down us. Like it could just straight up be an end thing.
That did happen. I recall that. It did
happen one time.
Still salty about the snow golems rising up out of the snow.
Like I said, use sparingly, that kind of thing is fine. But if I'm getting down before the fight starts, or to like a third of my health before the fight starts on a regular basis,
well, maybe you guys should be rolling those perception checks more then.
Maybe we should
every time I put you on a map, like that's probably the call sign. If something's uneasy or weird, start rolling those perception.
Fair.
I wouldn't mind it, and that would
fair.
be a good way of sussing that stuff out.
That's true. Yeah,
that's the.
It's an interesting psychological thing, right? Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's like it has something to do with like
all right, fool me once, shame on me. Fool me 14 times, maybe I'll start rolling perception checks.
Yeah. It's the psychological thing of like you give us a description and then you put us on a map. Maybe it's just the map, but it's like, all right, he's told us what's there. He's shown us what's there. That's all that's there.
Yeah.
We're not going to question it any further. We should start questioning it. Yeah.
It's the same psychology about why sometimes I don't put you on a map, because I don't want you to be in like combat mode for that.
Right. You don't want us to ask those questions. Yeah. Yep.
So all of the Goliath stuff is pretty much from the book, and then all of this stuff is not. It's this whole. It's the map, and the idea is based on Wormdoom Hunt, and then I have I'm keeping the skeletal structure of it, and then changing the innards, because I needed to scale it up basically, and change out the threats a little. Like the other one didn't have peritons, for example, and I was like, I want to use peritons here. This is a good example. This is a good way to use them. And
is it kind of like you're replacing like like you're talking about the kobolds with the periton, like just more threat level creatures?
Kinda. There's a little bit more to it, which I obviously can't get into, but a lot of it, totally and honestly, a lot of what I'm having to do to the rest of the book is scaling up, because that's a feature that I said from the very beginning is normally at this level you guys would be like near the end, I think, because it's just one of those like, hey, you make it to 11 and you're done.
Yeah.
And I wanted to change that, but of course D&D does get trickier to balance in those higher levels, and the book certainly does not account for the players being this high level for these areas. So But I think it's fun because I can let loose with a lot of stuff, and you guys can take a lot of punishment, and be able to meet out a lot of danger levels. I feel like I'm doing my job. If you guys feel like you need to make 2 short rests per day,
Yeah.
and I don't know if we probably haven't hit that most of the time, but the times where we do, it feels good to me that you guys are managing your resources. The threat is there, and you're responding to them. Although we technically did 1 short rest on the ship, but that was just to get Bardic Inspiration back.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
After this fight, I expect there to be a short rest after that.
Yeah, there probably will be, yes.
I mean, you guys haven't spent any spells. Like, everybody's full of spells and full of like key points and all their shit. So yes, I took away a lot of hit points, but you guys have so many freaking tools.
Yeah,
I'm not worried.
I'll just cast a healing word 6 times. I think I actually may still have a potion or 2. I got 1 potion of healing, 1 potion of greater healing. So yeah, I can stay alive for a little while. Surely.
But yeah, pretty much. Unless you count my little surprise round there, we haven't really had combat.
I will say this though: after Manix and now Valravn, my next character is going to have some fucking competition.
I was just thinking that you've been playing a squish. You've been playing a squish for so long.
Yeah. It's too long. I'm getting tired of the like. Okay, I could accidentally get taken out of the fight at any moment.
I'm
characters
playing a tanky ass tank next time.
I mean,
Kalinar was obviously the big central tank character.
Yep.
I'm trying to think of what other one shots you played if they've been at all front lines. It's hard to count the Forge of Fury guys because they were in and out so quick.
Yeah, exactly.
I think you had a swampy druid that was probably not very frontline, as I recall.
No, I remember him. He turned into a giant spider at one point, and he kind of frontline for a while as that. So as druids do.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't have a history with the big tanky characters.
Yeah,
I need to play one.
That would be the next goal, I think, for sure.
Yeah.
Perception investigation, best way to keep safe in D&D. Yeah, in fact, we had a player in our Patreon D&D game last night that said, investigation saves now, save dex, or investigation checks now, prevent dex saves later, or something like that. That was pretty funny.
I feel like that's just a part, and that's it's something we need to adapt to. I feel like it's just a part that we just overlook so often. We just sort of stumble into whatever trap or situation you've laid out. We just sort of be like, all right, well, let's just trigger the trap or trigger the situation, when we probably could do some checks to mitigate that a bit.
I don't know if that is that. Do you think that's us as players, or just we keep playing player characters that are like hilarious blunders? Because I know that's been a thing for a lot of our player characters, is they just kind of wade into the group. Like if I were playing my Rockstar Bard character, yes, I would be the same way. I would not be, even if the player knows, God, I really need to roll perception here, I'd be rolling into that room, screaming at the top of my lungs and triggering every fucking thing imaginable. And that does happen a lot with our group, where we are the opposite of the group that's very cautious and careful and checking everything. I don't know if that's just us as like impatient players, or if we just keep playing those kind of player characters that don't have a lot of the cautious, tactical mindedness, or maybe that person who's playing that kind of character gets overshadowed by the person who is playing the more blundering one.
That's very true. That may be because we also tend to like some diversity with our character, personality. So it like somebody usually has one of the blunderer personalities. I wonder if there's a little bit of it too. Maybe I'm wrong here, but there may be a little bit of it too, where our players kind of go into a lot of things being like, well, the DM has crafted this scenario, so we're gonna let this.
We're gonna let it happen.
We're gonna let it happen. Yeah.
Let me just read your paragraph, DM, and let the thing happen.
This is the situation you've laid out, so we're gonna let you lay it out.
Yeah.
We're not gonna try to intercept it or shut it down before it gets started.
It is funny how even if it is worse for the players, it often ends up being a more memorable, exciting session if the bad thing really happens and escalates and almost to a hilarious degree. So maybe that's kind of an unspoken agreement we have as players and DM.
I think I detect sometimes, especially when there's all 5 of us, or all 6 of us, I guess, situations where we're talking about a thing too much. and it's like, all right, we're talking about how we're gonna deal with this, and then somebody just wants to let's just fucking do it. Let's just do the thing, start the story.
That is
let's
the
go.
thing that happens. Yeah, people over plan.
Yeah.
Where it's no longer fun to plan, and then you still don't have an actual like great plan to begin with.
Yeah. So then somebody just goes like, well, let's just activate the DMs.
Yeah. Let's just Leroy Jenkins this and have somebody scream and run.
Yeah. And then we'll just deal with it whenever deal with whatever it is whenever it happens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because like Eric wants us to sit and think about it, but then sometimes as a player we're like, okay, we're really overthinking it.
Yeah.
We should probably step in because Eric's listening and he won't interrupt, but maybe it's our initiative to stop all that planning. So
yeah,
it's like, all right, it's gone long enough. We should probably
we should probably do something now.
That is a hard thing as a DM, is choosing when to step in with that too, and when to like finally throw down the all right, you guys have planned enough. Now it's time to move on with the story.
I think that was what I was getting from you tonight. Was the like. Raymond and I were debating the plan for like 5 minutes, and you kind of like 2 or 3 times kind of stepped in a bit like, all right, you guys are landing now. Like let's move on.
Yeah. Because at some point it just ends up going around in circles with this planning.
It does,
all
absolutely.
right, nobody's really made a choice here, so I gotta kind of force the hand. And again, that's kind of the producer role that DM rolls too. Is like at some point we're just gonna move on with the story.
We're just gonna move on. Yeah, things are happening now.
Things are happening now. All right. Anything else about session 54?
Well, we got a lot done tonight. I feel like a lot happened, even though we've been. I guess that's probably why a lot happened. We didn't have a fight, so we were able to. Fights tend to take up screen time.
True. Yeah. And some fights do make a lot of things happen. I think the Ascendant fight's a good example of that, where it felt like a lot happened during that fight.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, I think this was a good example of you guys made a lot of cool story progress, and there was I like that this one had a little bit of everything in it too. Like there was a lot of social scenes, and then first you had to leave Wormdoom Crag and had social scenes there. Then you got to Sky Tower Shelter, had social scenes there. Then you had the whole environmental hazards getting up there, and then we stopped right before a big combat encounter.
Yeah.
So we kind of got a little sampler pack of everything.
Yeah.
And now I can't promise that's going to happen next week. It's probably going to be a whole lot of combat.
Probably. But I think catch up. We're going to catch up on our combat.
Yeah, exactly. I think we're due.
Nice.
I got to start thinking about when to level you guys up again, because it's starting to be a couple sessions now.
That's true. It's weird because it's been like 2 fights, I guess. The belay fight and then the ship fight. And now we're going to have a 3rd fight at this level.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, but it shouldn't necessarily be tied to fights. I feel like experience. The bad thing is D&D kind of 5e breaks you of that, because you're pretty much only getting experience for fights versus we use milestone, and
that's what I was thinking. Is more like you really get to express your level up through fights, because
true.
Most of the level ups are functionally
that is true.
Better
it is still ultimately a war game. Yeah, molded into a RPG experience.
Right.
Very true. All right, I think that will do it for this week's Frostside chat. Thank you to Chris and Raymond. I am Eric, and we will see you next week.
See you next week.
It's going to be August. Holy crap.
Where did your lolly go?